2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn Joe into DFS pros.
Okay, welcome to Tacos Fast 40, although this week it will be a Tacos Fast 37. One more driver than we had last week at Atlanta. We are headed to Las Vegas Motor Speedway, part of the Ultimate Sports Weekend at Las Vegas, as we also have the UFC event this week, UFC 222. That's in Las Vegas, along with the Vegas Golden Knights playing some of the best hockey in the league. You're going to hear it all this weekend about how, Las Vegas is getting the Raiders next year and how they've got all this stuff going on for them. Very busy week here at Vegas. We've got a couple of guys from the Vegas area, a couple of brothers, that'll garner a lot of attention this week. So, before we get into the track analysis here, I'd like to remind you guys that you can come check out all of our content at DFSArmy.com. Last week, the Domination Station Optimizer gave everybody the winning lineup in the Xfinity Series. Almost said Nextel, but the Xfinity Series race last week. We had over 30 people tie for first in all of the GPPs last week in the Xfinity race. So that was great. We'll be doing the Xfinity race tomorrow. We'll have that on the Domination Station, have a research station for that as well. But you can check out all of our content for NASCAR. We've got a really good look for the research station this week. We got a full breakdown of last week, the ownership, and just how guys fared. I know they're not the exact same type of track, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but with some guys like Bubba Wallace and Will Byron, this is all we have to look at is last week. So I've broken down last week, and then recent 1.5 mile stats and long-term 1.5 mile stats. It's important to kind of see who's gotten better over the years at these and who's just always been good at driving at these 1.5 mile ovals. And then of course we have the regular breakdown of all the Las Vegas races and the nuts lineups of years past and the historical performances and everything you need to study for this week's race. You can come check it out at DFSArmy.com. Use promo code TACO on sign up to get a lifetime 10% off. And come check me out. I do believe that this Sunday, right before the race at 11:30, I will be on the air on Horn FM in Texas, 104.9 The Horn. And you can check that out online. I'll post a link in the Slack chat, but you can either tune in. If you're close enough, you can tune in on the radio or just check out the online stream. But I'll be doing a quick breakdown of the track there as well. But we'll get more in-depth here. I'm looking at Las Vegas. This will be the first time that we'll race Las Vegas more than once in a year. Usually this is a one-time-a-year event that kicks off the West Coast swing in NASCAR. But we will be coming back to Las Vegas for a playoff race. And that means that the manufacturers and the owners and everyone will pay a lot more attention to this week. This week matters a lot more because we need to fine-tune these cars for the important playoff race that will take place here for the first time later on the season. Like I had said earlier, this is the second 1.5 mile track of the season that we will see. So we have Atlanta to compare it to, but it's quite different than Atlanta, honestly. Atlanta is a quad oval, as where this is a tri-oval. This is more of your classic tri-oval intermediate track. And the average driving speed, or average running speed, is not nearly as fast as Atlanta. Atlanta averages about 155 miles per hour. At Las Vegas, you'll average about 138 miles per hour. And this week will be affected by some wind. A few years ago at this race, we had some wind, and that kind of messes with certain drivers. Although Kyle Larson had said that it doesn't really affect the younger drivers as much as the older drivers who constantly complain about it. But we'll see what drivers say throughout practice tomorrow. Again, when comparing it to Atlanta, they are similar in them being green flag fests. I guess Las Vegas considerably more so than Atlanta. It was top 5 last year in average laps finished. And it ranks second overall in number of laps, or percentage of laps ran under green flag conditions. 90% of the laps will be run here under green flag conditions, with only 10% of the race being raced under the caution flag. And like we saw last week at Atlanta, that was a green flag. Really, it was just a straight green flag run the entire way, pretty much. We should see a lot more of the same here, which leads to more fast laps. Less of your fast laps are being lost to the constant caution and yellow flag laps, which don't hand out any fast laps to anybody. Something that I'm going to be telling you over and over here is that the stronger drivers have a much bigger advantage here than they do at almost any other track. The biggest difference between this week and Atlanta was Atlanta, outside of the restrictor plate races, drivers starting 35th or worse averaged the most fantasy points of any other track. Outside of those 2 restrictor plate races, where of course the ones in the back average significantly more than the ones that start in the front. But Las Vegas is the total other way around. It ranked second to last in fantasy scoring for those who start 35th or worse. So if you're starting 35th or worst at Atlanta, you're expected to finish with around 25 fantasy points. The average for Las Vegas is 14. Night and day difference there. You really cannot be rostering any of these back-end guys because they just aren't going to go anywhere. There's so many green flag laps. They're going to be laps and laps behind. There may be a case for just punting all the way down to the bottom, since all the plays at the bottom are pretty much going to be bad. Last week we saw Cole Witt in the winning lineups, but honestly, you should really try to avoid the back-end drivers as much as you can this week. Looking at the pole sitter, last week at Atlanta, it ranked 3rd overall in average pole laps led. The pole sitter averaged 107 laps led. Here at Las Vegas, the pole sitter does not do too well. Only averages 35 laps led. The pole sitter at Atlanta will average 35 fast laps. Here it's 24 fast laps. So the pole sitter is less of a guaranteed thing here, and especially with Ryan Blaney taking the pole with a bunch of better drivers around him. I don't think this would be one of the best situations to attack the pole sitter. And well, if you allow that to segue into the field breakdown here, Ryan Blaney cost you $8,700, gets quite the price bump after being a free play last week, starting all the way in the back, starting 26th, and finishing 12th, doing all right, being in the winning lineup. Just kind of as expected last week, although he wasn't really riding top 10 all that much. He got the pole, which is great, but we're going to have to see if he can keep up these speeds at all in final practice, with Kevin Harvick right next to him. And just the way this track is set up, I really think that Harvick, whether he starts on the inside or the outside, he can make it work for him. And he's in a real threatening spot for Ryan Blaney here. The way this track works out is through turns 1 and 2, it's quite bumpy down low, so I'd imagine that Blaney would want to take the outside lane. The outside lane is kind of preferred here. You basically avoid the bumps on the bottom of turns 1 and 2, and then when you get to turns 3 and 4, there are multiple grooves that you can make work. You can pretty much drive any lane you want, and this really all suggests that the guys starting outside of the pole have a good chance to steal all the dominator points from the pole sitter, and we've seen it happen here time and time again. The pole sitters oftentimes been completely blocked from getting many dominator points at all. And I could definitely see that happening again here with Ryan Blaney starting alongside Kevin Harvick, who absolutely dominated last week. and has a history of dominating here as well, and was faster in practice. So to move on to Harvick, I'm not completely off of Blaney. I'll have some exposure. You want to set some minimum exposure to him, because he could absolutely lead a bunch of laps, and when you lead laps off the get-go, you also get those fast laps to go with it, which are really nice. But I do see him working his way back, and I'm not bullish on him at all. I'm quite bearish, but play him like 5 to 10% if you're multi-entering. That's why I'd say do with Blaney. Just kind of hedge a little bit just in case, because he can dominate. We've seen him dominate at Texas, lead over 200 laps there before. So he does have it in his repertoire. 1.5 mile tracks are his best. But, you know, if I were to imagine the race going one way, it's definitely not the Ryan Blaney way. We're looking at Kevin Harvick here, starting on the outside, or the inside, probably the inside. $10,300, led 181 laps last week, 78 fast laps. That's just Harvick being Harvick at Atlanta. Did the same thing the year before, just finally got into victory lane. Just awesome all-around race, and judging by the way he was talking during interviews this week, it seems like he's not even caring about this week, really. He said he's most excited about the Can-Am race here at Las Vegas. That's what he's looking forward to the most. And he really loves California, Fontana. He's really looking forward to that. So obviously he's not going to be like distracted or anything. I mean, the Can-Am race is that's something that like Tony Stewart would do back when he was racing. I mean, he's old, he's having fun, he's an OG. Second fastest in the first practice, although it is important to note that the first practice, again, it's not important this week at all. They had the practices are going a lot faster this year. They only had 55 minutes to practice overall, and they're used to about an hour and 30 minutes to get used to, or to get ready for qualifying. Had less than an hour, so it was all qualifying trim out there. They barely did anything in race trim. So first practice, it's going to be really hard to it's going to be hard to use that data. That second practice is going to be a lot more important. So tune in tomorrow. We'll make important adjustments to the projections as final practice and 10 lap speeds come in. But so far, Kevin Harvick is looking great. Super confident, likes his car. There's nothing really to complain with him. It's really just a battle of, do you like him or do you like Martin Truex Jr. more? Or possibly some guys like Keselowski or Larson, but we'll get to them. Harvick is looking like, it looks like he will just pass Blaney and lead the first chunk of laps and could dominate quite a bit here. He averages 33 laps led and 27 fast laps, and that's with 2 DNFs recently, including last year and in 2014. Some early DNFs for him. So he won in 2015, dominating a bunch of laps there. If you look back, he absolutely killed it. 138 fantasy points. Started 18th and led 142 laps, 80 fast laps. That was by far the best fantasy scoring output that we've seen from the last 5 or 6 years here at this track. 138. Usually, you don't see any scores past 100 outside of him and Truex last year. So Harvick, he is absolutely capable of doing that again. He's going to be chalk, definitely. But I like how our qualifying really set itself up this week. No more free plays in the back, really, and they're going to be spread out a bit between Blaney, Harvick, Truex, Keselowski, Kyle Busch for sure. There's no clear absolute chalk like last week with Martin Truex Jr. starting in the back. Truex Jr. is the most expensive, but Harvick is looking like he might be in a better spot to dominate and put up those dominator points, which are just absolutely key here. So, really liking Harvick, and I think everyone else is going to as well. It's going to be hard to be overweight on Harvick, especially when you need to get Truex involved and him costing more. So, you can either play a bunch of him, you could go underweight on him. There's no wrong way to attack Harvick. The slate's going to be won or lost. Just other guys, really, unless he just leads absolutely everything. I think he's just going to get a large chunk of these laps led, but I don't think he's going to win or dominate the whole thing or anything. I just think that he could lead a segment or two. Kurt Busch is starting third, local Las Vegas native, and well, he considers this track a top 5 favorite track of him, or for him. Not sure why it's not his favorite, but top 5, that's pretty good. He really likes the surface of this track. He thinks he had said that the grip here at this track is right in its prime. It's a really nice track that's not really up for repave soon, maybe in the future, but it's looking really nice out there. Last year we saw this track get really hot, and that caused a lot of the grip to fall off, but this year it's not even going to pass 70 degrees. It's going to be really nice. So a lot of drivers are talking about how they like this track, especially Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch really likes the track this week, likes his car, likes how he dominated last week. He got 52 lead laps and 20 fast laps, and that's something that we never see Kurt Busch do. But we know that he loves Atlanta, always does well there every year. He just qualified a little too high. I don't like how he qualified, and just listening to how he's going to be attacking this race, basically it talks about how Goodyear is going to work some fall off into these tires, and pretty much the younger guys are going to run their tires out in the beginning of the race, allowing the older drivers, really just anyone that chose a more conservative tire strategy, to work themselves past the field in the long runs. And you know, we're anticipating some very long green flag runs. I mean, it's NASCAR, anything could happen, but for the most part, we're going to expect a lot of green flag runs, and tire management's going to be key. So I kind of like these older drivers a little bit this week. You know, if Jeff Gordon was racing here, I'd love him. I'd love to play Jeff Gordon here. But Kurt Busch, he just qualified a little bit too high, starting third. Can't really get behind him there. I know that he really made me crow a little bit last week. Never thought he would have dominated. Never would have thought Newman would have dominated either. But I don't see him getting around Blaney, Harvick, and Truex and Larson and holding them off. But his car and his teammate Bowyer's car, and of course Harvick's car, just looked fantastic last week. Stewart-Haas was on fire. Definitely trot some Stewart-Haas stacks out there with playing Busch, Harvick, and Bowyer possibly together. That's a really strong strategy. Of course, Almirola's in a great spot for this race. So Stewart-Haas is looking about as good as they can look right now. I would like Kurt Busch a lot more if it wasn't for the fact that he was just starting third. And starting behind him, we've got the defending champion of this track, Martin Truex Jr., the 1.5 mile god. Started second to last week, and did about as expected. Didn't have many fast laps. Kind of worried about that. Only 11 fast laps from him last week, and led only one lap, which I do believe was a caution lap. Didn't really dominate, but he had problems with his inspection that entire week. Not really sure what to make of Truex, but of course at a 1.5 mile track, he's going to make himself a factor. If he ever finds himself in the back of the field to work his way up real quick. Have an average finish of 2.8 over the last year and a half, or the last 2 seasons actually, at 1.5 mile tracks. Average finish of 2.5 is just ridiculous. Considerably better than everyone else in this field. Just absolutely disgusting. An average running position of 4.4. If you factor in any crashes, that's crazy to think about. He's just pretty much always running in the top 5. And that's where I see him running all race constantly. I don't know if he'll dominate. I don't know if he'll be the guy leading all the laps, and not sure about the fast laps, but it's still Truex. You kind of just play him at these and be about your way. It's just Harvick is looking like he's in a really good spot, and I think that in cash you really have to consider. You know, you're probably playing Kyle Busch, so do you put him with Harvick, or do you put him with Truex, or do you play neither of these guys? I couldn't imagine playing neither of them, because one of these two is definitely going to lead a large chunk of this race. I'm just not 100% sure who. Could be Truex, could be Harvick. That's part of the beauty of this week. There are a lot of ways you can go this week. And then right behind Truex, fastest in first practice and looking really, really good out there, Kyle Larson. Only $9,800. Very good price for Larson. He was really confident here back a few months ago. He had a Goodyear tire test at Las Vegas. He was talking about how he's got the car in tune for this track. And they've been waiting for this race for a little while. Larson is definitely last week was not the track for him, honestly. Atlanta really favors the inside line, and with Larson, he loves riding the wall. The way that this track is set up with the outside line kind of being preferred, and you having complete freedom through turns 3 and 4 to ride the wall or do whatever you want, that's going to work right into Larson's wheelhouse. And he was runner-up last year, finished right behind Truex. Didn't lead laps, but that he can. His 1.5 mile numbers are really good. Average finish of 4.6. Average running position 6.2. I mean, again, always in the top 5. That speed is really going to factor into his ownership a bit. He was low owned last week at about 14% ownership, starting 5th. He might be forgotten about again with Truex and Harvick in the mix. They're not as must-play as last week, so he will be higher owned than 16%, or 14%, but 20s to 30s, probably under 30%. That's where you'll find Larson. And with these practice speeds, maybe he'll venture into the 30% mark if he dominates practice again tomorrow. But it's something you've got to watch out with him. He's just kind of wicked fast, and he has this car tuned. He kind of has the advantage with the tire test. But he's one of those young drivers that could use up his tires early and get shuffled to the back. But again, you want these aggressive drivers to jump out in the restart, because once you get the lead, you can sit there with the lead for lap after lap after lap and just rack them up. And, anytime Larson dominates, he's a must play. Because he can lead 100, 200 laps, no problem. So I like him, and I wish I liked Chase Elliott, but he's really in a spot where I can't really get behind him. He has no. It really doesn't look like he's going to lead any meaningful laps, and his fast lap numbers aren't good either. I'm looking at his recent 1.5 mile stats. He only averages 5 lead laps. Long term, he only averages 10 lead laps. We just haven't seen him dominate in these 1.5s. Hasn't dominated yet at Las Vegas. He did finish 3rd last year. And he crashed in 2016. So there's no way we don't really know that much about him yet, even though he's been racing here in the NASCAR Cup Series for a couple of years now. It's just at Las Vegas with the one crash. We only have that one race of him to go off of, and he did well. Looking back at that race last year, started 12th, finished 3rd, 55 fantasy points, was theoretically in the winning lineup. The winning lineup last year, and this will show you how good the dominant drivers are. It was all expensive drivers. Like, if you were to play the optimal lineup, you would have been like $10,000-$15,000 over the salary cap. Just the top tier drivers stayed in the top tier, and they did top tier things all day long. And Chase Elliott, I think he's just going to come in. It's just hard to see him being able to get around Larson, Truex, Harvick, and Blaney, and Keselowski, who dominates this track right behind him, and Kyle Busch behind him as well. I really cannot see him being the dominator here. I love me some Chase. That's my boy. But this is probably not the time to be playing him. He didn't look that great last week at his home track. It was okay. Got 7 lead laps, 12 fast laps, finished 7th. But he really wasn't a factor. He wasn't running in the top 4 or 5 much at all in this race. So, I love Chase, but I'll use him a different week. I'm not going to be on him this week. I might fade him completely, honestly. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I'm probably going to fade him completely, for sure. Starting 7th. Kind of saw a similar thing last week. He started 6th. 12% of the field owned him, and he finished 16th and did nothing. Got nothing for you. Only 2 fast laps. That was it. And this is a track that he's had less success on. Looking back the last few years, 33rd, 12th, 29th, 27th, 18th. Not sure how much of that was trouble, but this is just typical Ricky for me. Qualified too high and just not going to use him because of it. Keselowski starting 8th is the best at this track, I'd say, of everyone, at least since the Car of Tomorrow era. He's won this twice in 2014, 2016. Hasn't finished worse than 7th place in the last 5 years at this track. Always dominating. Way better driver rating than anyone else. Average running position of 5th. Average finish of 3rd. Averages 31 fast laps, 37 lead laps. Hasn't really put up the large chunks of lead laps. He just knows how to finish well here. He really does. He's great at pit strategy. Just knows what to do. He's only had one performance that was like really must-have. Back in, well, it was last year here at this event. He led 89 laps, 65 fast laps, racked those up pretty early. And that's a constant trend that we see here. The guy that, not necessarily the pole sitter, but whoever takes the lead early on will get most of the clean air fast laps. So, if you're going to ask your crystal ball anything this week, you want to know who's going to lead the first large chunk of laps. So those dominator points are going to be just absolutely essential. You need to hit the right person, because if you don't have them, if you don't have the 1 or 2 or 3 guys that dominate, you're gonna have a hard time cashing anything this week. So Brad Keselowski, love him, and I imagine the field will love him as well. He looked amazing last week. 38 lead laps, 27 fast laps, finished 2nd. Really outside of Harvick, he was the only guy that really stuck out as having a car that was just really fast. It was a lot faster than it had appeared in practice. His practice times were terrible. That didn't matter, but his practice times are fine so far this week. 7th in first practice. He's going to be popular for a reason, and I think he's going to do well yet again. I'm not sure if he'll be the guy that dominates, but he absolutely could be. He's right in the mix. Eric Jones starting 9th. Was one of the lowest owned guys last week, and he was starting 10th. So starting 9th this week, he's going to continue to be one of the lowest owned guys. And that's pretty much his upside. I don't see him, he's right there with Chase Elliott. He's like a worse version of Chase Elliott here. Just, I don't see him getting past all of these top tier drivers and doing anything meaningful. The only thing he can do is just stay in place or finish in the top 5, and maybe he might be able to squeak out value. But that's not the greatest ceiling in the world. I don't like Eric Jones because of that. I think he's going to go a little backwards, just a little bit, but he's ultimately not going to do much for you, maybe like 30 fantasy points. Joey Logano was not sneaky at all last week. He thought he'd be more sneaky than he was, but he got a fair amount of ownership. And just like his teammate Keselowski, he has a great track history here. Pretty much always in the top 10, 4th last year, runner-up to Keselowski the year before. Penske finished 1-2. They could do that again here. I mean, Penske's looked awesome. Fords have just looked fantastic this year. His odds are double of that of Keselowski's, though. We're starting to see a real difference in the skill level between Keselowski and Logano. We'd think of them as more of like on equal footing in years past, and we'd see odds of like 6-1 for Kes and like 7-1 or 8-1 for Logano. And especially a couple of years ago when Logano was looking like he was in championship form, we'd think of these guys as equal, but Keselowski really has separated himself from Logano, and it's apparent here with the odds 6-1 for Keselowski, 12-1 for Logano, despite having almost as good of a track history here, averaging just about as many lead laps, just not quite there with the fast laps. And at his 1.5 mile tracks, he's only averaged 6.4 fast laps, 4.7 lead laps. I know his season was pretty crap last year, but man, at the 1.5 mile tracks, that's where he struggled the most, honestly. But last week he looked all right. Started 16th and finished 6th. 12 fast laps and 1 lead lap. Just okay. You can kind of expect something similar here. He's going to move up a little bit, starting from 10th. But I don't see him dominating leading laps. He might just rack up a few fast laps, but I think his ceiling is kind of limited here. And unless he can somehow find lead laps, I don't think he has much value for you starting 10th. Especially at $9,300 when Keselowski is a much better play. $100 more dollars. So, don't really like Logano. Do like Clint Boyer starting 11th, $8,100. Looked great last week. Looked just fantastic. 17 fast laps, finished 3rd at only 10% ownership. He just stuck his nose down, and even though he had never done well in Atlanta before, he looked fantastic last week. No complaints about him. That ownership level is great, and I think he's going to be just as sneaky this week. He was starting 9th last week, starts 11th this week, which is a little bit better for you. And with his equipment, he'll be able to hang all night long. He isn't really going to go anywhere. I kind of like him in cash if it wasn't starting, top 15. But the only thing I worry about him is, and I worry about a little bit with like Logano or Keselowski, but like this range here between like 5th and 15th, historically has not put up very good fantasy scoring numbers, but it really is all about just finding that one person that dominates. Boyer's not going to dominate for you, but he's great to use in like a Stewart Haas stack with Harvick or Almirola, put them all together. You could either use Boyer or you could use Kurt Busch, but Boyer's probably a better play to use there, just straight up, costs less and starts farther back. Yeah, Boyer, I just mainly like him because last week nobody had him and he was key. He was just key. If he's going to keep riding like that, I don't mind him at all. He could definitely win another GPP for you. He did last week. Paul Menard starting in 12th, $6,900. Was not as impressive last week as I thought he was going to be in his new Wood Brothers Ford. He didn't manage to get a single fast lap. Obviously no lead lap. Started 15th and finished in 17th. He was riding top 10 for a little while towards the end of the race, but he got shifted back. Ended up a few laps back. I think only like 13 or 14 people finished on the lead lap, if I'm not mistaken, last week, just because of the non-stop green flag runs. The average green flag run was 45 laps. That was just crazy last week. But Menard didn't impress me. And starting 12th, he's in a much worse space than last week. Don't really see much reason to play him. He was 3rd fastest in the first practice, but unless that holds up, I really can't play Paul Menard starting 12th. Kyle Busch starting 13th is going to be popular. Probably a great place to start your cash game lineups. He's the hometown favorite. Well, not the favorite here, actually. Vegas a little smarter than that, but 7-1, still pretty good odds for him. He has not dominated. Well, he's dominated this race recently, but he hasn't won this race recently. Pretty decent lead lap numbers. Averages 30 lead laps per race. Average running position of 6th. These 1.5 mile tracks, long term and short term, Kyle Busch has always done well. Last week, started on the pole, got shifted back immediately, but did finish with 23 fast laps. Got way more than Truex did, more than Larson, guys like that, more than Blaney. So I do like the fact that the fast laps are there. They're always there for Kyle Busch. Although at Las Vegas historically, only 15 fast laps per race, but maybe those numbers would be a little better if they raced here twice a year. The only thing I worry about with Kyle Busch is that ownership is certainly going to be there. Everybody knows he's from Las Vegas, and they might overvalue that with Kurt and Kyle. In fact, I really do see that happening. I see people pushing his ownership perhaps into the 40% range, especially if he puts up anything in practice tomorrow. So, I mean, he was 4th fastest in the first practice. Not that Kyle Busch isn't a good play. I do think he is a very good play starting 13th. He kind of gets his value just in that place differential if he finishes top 5, and he certainly could lead plenty of laps here. So I like the play. I just think he's going to be very popular. And I think Jimmie Johnson won't be popular at all because he has yet to finish a single race. He crashed at the duel, the Clash at the Daytona 500, and last week at Atlanta he crashed. Finished 27th. It looked like he was going to finish a race for a while, but it didn't work out in his favor. He didn't look good even before he crashed. A driver rating of 54.7, and he was nowhere near the top 10. He was honestly like a lap down, 2 laps down most of the race, if memory serves correct. He just wasn't a factor. All of his long-term stats, of course, look great. He's dominated here at Las Vegas before, and it's just week after week with Jimmie Johnson, he's always going to look fantastic. And a couple of years ago here, he did dominate. He had 76 lead laps, 37 fast laps, started 11th, finished 3rd, and he was the highest value player in the entire slate. But he's gone a ways backwards since then. But he was still popular as ever last week, garnered 30% ownership, even though I expected him to be lower in ownership with all of those crashes coming in, but he was still as popular as ever. $8,900, just the fact that there is an 8 on his price tag at the $8,900, that's probably going to keep his ownership up a decent amount. I'm not going to say that he's going to crash again, especially at a track with such a low DNF rate and expected green flag runs and all that, but I guess the takeaway from it is that his car hasn't been the greatest. It really hasn't, and even when he's been running, he just hasn't looked impressive. So $8,900, although it seems cheap for Jimmie Johnson, it's not really. It's kind of the price that he should have been for a while. Honestly, like over the last year or two, he's really taken a step backwards. All of his long-term stats look like relics compared to what he's really putting out there. Long-term, he has about 100 driver rating at 1.5 mile tracks. In the short term, over the last 2 years, that driver rating's down to 83.6. Not good. Not good for the Gymster. He can really only win by walking backwards into this thing, I think, honestly, or hitting some sort of pit strategy. Michael McDowell's $5,900. He's starting 15th, and you don't want to play him. Austin Dillon is starting 16th. You don't really want to play him either, honestly. Last week he was starting 25th and made for a really good value play. They moved up to about 15th position and then hit a brick wall. Couldn't go any farther than that and was pretty much at the tail end of the lead lap, if not one lap down, for the rest of the race. Ended up finishing 14th and was really important for just that place differential alone. But 0 fast laps, 0 lead laps, of course. Kind of limits his upside. And at $7,600, starting 16th, I really don't see a path to value for him. William Byron looks like a 10-year-old boy, but he is not a bad driver. Started 23rd last week and finished 18th. Was okay, but the ownership as well is surprising for someone starting so far back in a top-tier team's equipment. So starting 17th, you'd imagine he's going to once again be very low owned, probably under 10%. Although in first practice he was looking pretty quick, 5th in speed, and we'll see how that goes into tomorrow. But $7,200 is probably too cheap for Byron. By the end of the year, we'll see him in the $8,000 range, I think, for sure. So get him while you can. Get him while he's at this low ownership. Honestly, I think that he could, while 17th isn't the best starting position for him, honestly, I could still see him doing something, maybe finishing top 15. I just wish he started lower. I wish he was 23rd again, so I could play him again. because he could definitely do even better. I know he's green, but we don't know his upside yet. We just don't. We'll have to see. And judging by last week, he's going to be okay. 2 fast laps isn't great, but better than Austin Dillon, I'll tell you that. Daniel Suarez, $7,300, starting 18th. Looked all right last week. I know he went backwards starting 4th, but that's a terrible starting spot for him. 18th is fine. I think he's going to move up from there. He had 7 fast laps, which is pretty good. 1.5 mile stats are comparable to Austin Dillon. They actually look almost the same in every way. So kind of expect an Austin Dillon type performance out of him. Just sort of middling. But he's in a little better equipment, of course, in JGR. So I'd involve him in JGR stacks. That sounds like a good plan, honestly. Playing with Hamlin, playing with Kyle Busch. That's kind of how I like to approach it. I do like a manufacturer this stack this week again. We've seen manufacturers kind of perform in packs a bit more this season and last season than we have in seasons past. Suarez's teammate Hamlin is $9,100 and starts in 19th. He's probably the freest play in cash. That it just makes the most sense. It's not like Trick starting last, but this is the best value play you have for place differential of any of the studs. Hamlin starting 19th. His average finish here is 11th, and at 1.5 miles tracks, average running position 9th and average finish of 8th. That's about what you can expect from him. 7th to 10th place finish, somewhere around there, and starting 19th. That's gonna work out value for you, especially with him just being a hair over $9,000. Unfortunately, it means that you can't stack like a Harvick and a Truex together, especially if you're gonna play like a Kyle Busch or something like that. But he's still gonna be a core play, one of the highest owned plays on the board for sure. And you're not going to get much place differential this week because the guys in the front tend to stay in front. So, 19th to 10th, that's pretty good. I'll take those 10 positions or 9 positions. You're going to have to take that kind of performance this week. Hamlin, just a very safe play. Play him in cash games. And if you want to get bold, you can fade him in GPP because he'll be 30 to 40% owned. Maybe even more if there's enough hype behind him. But right now he projects out as a top value play. So definitely get him involved in your lineups. Alex Bowman, I like him for GPP. He was only 8% owned last week, starting 18th. He starts 20th this week, and I think he's going to go underlooked again. His price tag is similar to last week. It's gone up a little bit, though. And last week he finished 20th. He didn't do anything really too impressive, only a couple of fast laps. The play is pretty much just for the ownership. If anyone looks at his track history here, it's going to be awful. 43rd and 37th, but that was obviously not in Dale Jr.'s car. It wasn't. He was a few years ago when he was on the NASCAR circuit. He was like just a back end driver, I would say like a Michael McDowell, but Michael McDowell is kind of the same thing where he was a back end driver and got into some okay equipment, but he'd be like your Cole Witt, Jeffrey Earnhardt types. And so those numbers are kind of different. They're obviously going to be a lot better now. We still don't know exactly what to make of them past last week's performance, so this will be pretty telling. Don't pile in on him or anything. Just in GPP makes for a nice little pivot play with knowing that he's going to be so low owned. And starting 20th, all he really needs to do is finish top 10. And he was kind of nosing the top 10 off and on last week. Not for any long stretch of time or anything, but just enough to sort of make him interesting. Casey Kane, $6,200. That price tag made him a bit popular last week. Just a little bit. 15% ownership, but starting 14th, that ownership is actually pretty high because he really should have been a lot lower owned than that, starting so high. So starting 21st, I'd imagine he beats that this week and gets enough ownership to make him a bleh kind of play. It's just the $6,200 really does save you a lot of salary that you might need this week. It's just you kind of don't want to make this play because we know that he's in worse equipment, and there may be a lot of people looking at him and they see his Las Vegas driver rating of 99.4 and go, whoa, why is he $6,200? Well, that was because he was on Hendricks, and Hendricks is a lot better than Levi and Family Racing. It just is. So Kane will make for an unsharp play, but he's also just such a good money saver that starting 21st, he still could do okay. I mean, last week he finished 21st, but even if he just stays where he's at, I mean, if he stays where he's at, he's probably not going to do that great. He'd have to move up to like the top 12 or so, but he could do that, and that would make him out to be a good play. I just like guys. I like other guys in this range a lot better. Like we'll get into Trevor Bayne, AJ Allmendinger, but starting right behind Casey Kane, 22nd. Jamie McMurray, $7,400. That is a good price tag for him. 22nd is a good starting position for him. I've been waiting for this for a while with Jamie McMurray, so he's going to be one of my top value plays this week. I'm going to be using a good amount of him. I'm not sure how ownership will hit him. Last week he started 13th and was owned an 8% clip. So I can't really see him passing 20% ownership, and $7,400, while the price is absolutely right, and I think he's going to be sort of a sharper play, like higher owned, the higher in stakes you go. I still, he kind of prevents you from like jamming in 3 big studs, and that's the only real gripe I have with him. I mean, in the last 5 years, he hasn't finished worse than 16th, so he's certainly going to move up 5 spots. And last year we saw him finish top 10. And at 1.5 mile tracks, his driver rating is considerably better at that track type than at other track types. This really is where McMurray is at his best, so he's one of my favorite plays of the week. Last week, David Reagan, who is starting right behind Jamie McMurray in the 23rd spot, last week he started 29th and garnered 20% ownership, and he was actually pretty highly owned in like the very high dollar tournaments. It's just the way it worked out with his salary. He was just a needed salary saver. Went from 29th to 23rd and did all right. Wasn't in the winning lineup. The guy that they were looking for was Cole Witt, I guess, but Reagan wasn't bad. Starting 23rd, though, that is starting too high for his britches, and you don't really want to play him this week. You just don't. Trevor Bayne, starting 24th, got absolutely no ownership last week. He started 20th and only got 6% ownership. So that makes for a really nice target in GPP with him. 13th at this track last year, 17th the year before that. Offers a little bit of upside for him. $6,300 price tag is still cheap, especially compared to his teammate Stenhouse. And he's priced up at $7,000. Which actually is pretty cheap for him, but $6,300, the price tag for Roush just overall is really cheap. And they can have pretty good results. I know that Bayne wrecked out last week, but again, that's just going to make his ownership even worse. He could be incredibly low owned. And starting 24th, all he has to do is top 15 finish, and at $6,300, that's all you need. So I like him a lot this week. And starting 25th, Ryan Newman, $7,100. One of my favorite plays. Last week we saw him put up 45 fast laps. We saw him put up those 17 lead laps right off the bat. He took the pole away from Kyle Busch and just took the lead. And I would say never looked back, but he was gone, honestly. He was gone if it wasn't for that caution that they threw 17 laps in. So I think it was Jeffrey Earnhardt had crashed or something. So Ryan Newman really should have dominated even more than he did last week. And I know that he ended up finishing in 22nd and really was a net negative if you played him. But starting second, you weren't supposed to play him. Starting 25th, however, you really should play him. His driver rating last week was 93. Really good, and at Las Vegas we've seen him have some great finishes in the past. 2015 he finished 3rd, finished 7th in 2014. Hasn't finished outside of the top 20 since a crash in 2013. Newman's in a solid spot here. Looks to be almost a lock for a top 20, and starting 25th, only $7,100. Everything's in the right spot with Newman. I don't know how popular he'll get, but he should get at least a fair amount of ownership. At least a quarter of the field should own him, if not more. They really should. And I think if you go up higher in stakes, then Newman's ownership will rise along with it. He's just a really good play this week. Bubba Wallace, Darrell Wallace Jr., starting in 26th, burned everyone last week. Starting 19th, he ended up crashing, finishing at 32nd, almost dead last. It was a real bummer. A lot of us are on him here, and that sucks. So this week, he's going to be sort of a GPP play. He got 21% ownership last week, so he's fairly popular, but he did burn all of those people, and I can't imagine tons will be going back, but starting 26th is a much better spot for him. $6,700, that price tag is alright. That's about where he should be priced at. Hasn't shown anything in practice yet, but we'll see tomorrow. That's more important. Yeah, I kind of like him, but just GPP only, because we still don't know what to make of Bubba. Didn't have any fast laps or anything, really. Didn't look impressive at all last week, even before he crashed, but you're playing him for the ownership this week, and just for the fact that he starts in 26th, which could do all right, and he's not in terrible equipment to where the range where we're just trying to avoid people. He's all right. He's in a Richard Petty Ford, Almirola's car from last year, so he should be able to hang. Might end up a lap or two down, but still, starting 26, he's going to work his way past, the David Reagans of the world. AJ Allmendinger, starting 27th, and more importantly, at a price tag of only $6,000. Very cheap for Allmendinger. In 2015, he finished 6th. 2016, 14th finishing position. His average running position here is 21st, with an average finish of 15th. So that gives you a little bit of warning there. It is important to look at average running position compared to average finish, because some guys, race up in the front all race long and then crash towards the end. That ruins their average finish. Average running position kind of pushes that back towards the mean a little bit. Shows you a bit more of an accurate readout of where they've been. So Allmendinger finishes better than he actually runs here by a bit of a margin. So that's something important to check out. But one thing I like with Allmendinger is he gets fast laps. 5 fast laps per race at Las Vegas. And for a $6,000 guy, it's not bad. And we've seen that trend of him getting fast laps has always been the case. He gets fast laps out of nowhere. Last week he had 3. Even though he finished 29th. Didn't look good, honestly. It wasn't the best race for him. I'm not sure if he got involved in something at the end. I don't remember. But I do believe, I think that he was involved in something and got sent back. I can't remember exactly what, but he didn't look the greatest last week. Driver rating of 44.5, which is really bad. So while he's in a good spot for value, starting 27th, with only $6,000, I would limit my exposure to him, but I would definitely use him. I'd try to use him at about a 30% clip here. And then Chris Buescher, $5,700, very cheap for Buescher. Starting 28th, he also represents some value. Came in with some ownership last week, starting 24th, 17% owned. Another reason I kind of like Allmendinger this week is last week he was 10% owned, but he was starting 21st, and that wasn't the best spot for him. Buescher is in a little better of a spot, but he just stayed where he was, finished 25th. No fast laps, and that's never a good thing. At this track, he's finished 23rd and 26th. So starting in 28th, while that looks pretty good, he really hasn't shown any reason. I don't know, he hasn't really done anything past like a top 25 finish here, or at any sort of 1.5 mile track. Like 1.5 mile stats for him. Average finish of 20th, but average running position of 23rd. I guess he could move up a few spots, but I'm not incredibly bullish about Buescher, even though the starting position is a bit right for him. I'm more about the Almirola, $7,700, starting 29th. That is fantastic for Almirola and his new number 10 Stewart-Haas Racing Ford. His teammates are looking great. He looked pretty good last week, started 11th and finished right around there, finished 13th. 8% ownership, and granted, he should have been low owned last week, but that driver rating of 82.6, very nice. Only a couple lead laps, but still, you got to look at last week with Almirola because you can't look at any of his old stats. You just can't. He was in a completely different car, different team. I guess you could transfer stats onto Bubba, honestly, but that's a different driver. So Almirola, like him this week a lot, starting 29th. He should be chalky. He really is the sharp play there, honestly. So Almirola, make him a core part of your lineup this week. And if he crashes, I am sorry, but he's just, as it stands right now, he's in a really good spot with incredible upside. Cole Custer, brand new addition to the Monster Energy Cup. Starting 30th, in practice at 31st, in his number 51 Rick Ware Racing Chevy, but he'll be sponsored by Haas Automation. Not entirely sure if he's going to be funded by Stuart Haas. I've heard rumblings about that, but the number 51 is a Chevy, so I'm not sure how that's going to work with him being Ford. We'll have to look into that a little bit, but Custer's a known commodity on the Xfinity series. And let me pull up some of those numbers real quick, and I'll tell you how he did on the Xfinity series. We can look at last week's sheet here, which we put up every week for the Xfinity series at dfsarmy.com. Promo code TACO on sign up will give you a 10% lifetime discount. Nice we get that plug in there while I pull up these numbers. But looking at Cole, he had a good season last year in the Xfinity series. 58% of the time he finished in the top 10. So over half his races he finished top 10. Got a win last year, and at 1.5 mile tracks had a driver rating of 97.6. Average finish 11.7, average running position of 10th, and averaged 18 lead laps, 10 fast laps in 1.5 or at 1.5 mile tracks. And that's in the Xfinity series, so of course you got to think on a scale. But he's a good young driver, making his debut, and no one's going to really own him because nobody knows who he is. I wish he had started like in the very, very, very back here, but the upside for him is the fact that the guys that start behind him are really not good at all. I think Ty Dillon will pass him starting in 31st, but past that, Di Benedetto, Chastain, Witt, Golding, Earnhardt, Gaze, I think Cole will be able to stay past those guys at least. I don't see him having the highest upside, and with someone's first race, you could end up with a race like Bubba's first race where didn't have the timing lines down in the pits, and almost like I think Bubba had said that he was looking for the wrong number during his first pit stop or something like that. So with new drivers, you have to be super cautious, but just get you a handful of them just in case. He's going to be very low owned. But that's really the only reason I would take him. That just, shiny new toy. Come on, it's a shiny new toy. But $6,400, he's not coming in at like $5,000 to make him a free play by any means. They know what's up with him. Then Ty Dillon started 31st. And man, last week he was in a similar position, starting 28th. He was supposed to be one of the best plays on the board. Got 4 fast laps, but only finished 26th. 3 or 4 laps down the entire race. Just got stuck laps down and couldn't do anything. Same as Allmendinger, really. Just got stuck laps down. And when you're stuck laps down and there are no cautions, you're just stuck. And he was stuck all race long. Towards the end of the race, he started to, when there were those crashes at the end of the race, he had started to move up a little tiny bit and almost kind of become useful. But then he just got shuffled back. Really showed no speed, 47 driver rating, and his 1.5 mile stats are admittedly pretty trashy compared to how he does at other track types. He's much better at the shorter, like 1 mile or half mile small tracks, and definitely has always been a very talented plate racer. So starting 31st, you gotta imagine that he has no Like, he has a pretty good floor, because he's not going to finish worse than like Di Benedetto, Chastain, Witt, Golding, those guys. He has a pretty rock solid floor, and his ceiling is there. I mean, really, Ty Dillon is someone who can finish like top 25, top 15, can sneak up there, but this is just not the track to do it. It is not. These back end guys don't, historically, they've not scored anything. So unless there are some cautions, unlike last week, and the trends are saying there probably won't be, it's hard to see Dillon putting up too crazy of a score to pay off value. But just know that ceiling is there for him. If he somehow craps out a top 15 finish somehow, he's like a must play. So consider that, but just know that there are better, more solid plays. I prefer Almirola as your play from back here because he's in the much better equipment. His teammates are in some of the top drivers in this field. He's going to be fine. Ty Dillon, I can't guarantee you he's going to be fine. Then there's the rest of this field. 32nd on back. Matt Di Benedetto, no. Ross Chastain starting 33rd, no. Cole Witt starting 34th. He looked great last week, but great as far as great goes for Cole Witt, that's a 28th place finish. He was just the crappy guy that you needed last week in order to do anything. Went up 4 spots from 32nd to 28th at like $4,000 some dollars or $5,000. Starting 34th, he's in a little better of a position this week, but he has no ceiling past getting past like Di Benedetto. That's about as high as he can go. He's kind of a trap. You don't want to chase anything from last week. I know he was in the nuts last week, but the chance of that happening again here, very low for him. I'd rather just go all the way to the bottom. And Greg Golding is starting almost near the bottom, starting in 35th, but I think he's actually going to finish last. That dude just loves to crash. You can't play him, just no. And then Jeffrey Earnhardt starting 36th. If you ever play him, then something's wrong with you. The only play I would consider, I don't even know if I would leave him unchecked or leave him checked in the domination station. Honestly, I'd recommend unchecking Di Benedetto through Gaze here, but you might want to get like 5% Joey Gaze, and the only reason being he's $4,600, and I could definitely see him I know he is like the worst car in this field. He is. He last in practice speeds, last in long-term and short-term 1.5 mile stats. Actually, in the short term, Jeffrey Earnhardt is slightly worse, but we're comparing different turds here. He's not good at all. It's just the fact that he's starting in last. Greg Golding's gonna explode. Jeffrey Earnhardt's gonna crash. Chastain could blow his chassis. So who knows? Gaze could move up 4 or 5 spots, and if you really need the top guys, he might. He's the only one I'd consider just for that price tag. But optimally, no, you want to avoid this entire range. So only if you're playing a ton of entries should you use any Gaze, and that would be the only guy I'd even mess with down here. Again, maybe the slightest bit of Cole Witt just after last week, but I wouldn't bank on that at all. So that'll do it. That's the field for you. It's a very good race this week. I like it a lot. No more crappy weather concerns. It's gonna be beautiful in Las Vegas. Beautiful temperatures out there. 69 degrees, giggity, and it's gonna be a great race. Plenty of options. Not gonna be ties this week. I really don't think they're gonna be ties. Unless something chalky comes out, but the chalk is going to be kept contained under 40% this week, and that's what's going to be excellent. Lots of options to choose from, lots of great pivots to choose from, and no mandatory plays. So, hope you guys have a good week. Bring more helmets, put more helmets in the top of the GPPs, and I'll see you guys next week. Later.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA, weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.